This story is called Confusing Bus Ride Once Around the City to the Car on the Way Home. Script for the perfect trip. This headline sounds interesting and sparks the reader's curiosity. It hints at some confusion during the bus ride and the journey to the car to get home. The phrase "script for the perfect trip" creates an engaging title, implying that this could be a fascinating story about why legal substances like drugs are not always beneficial. Forward. This story is not fiction or made up. It actually happened and is based on true events. Of course, I won't mention any real names here. A long time ago, once upon a time, this is how most stories and fairy tales begin. However, this story, unfortunately, is based on true events and facts. The following happened in this universe. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says the following about drugs and substances of all kinds that are bad for the brain. They turn this biological marvel of nature into soup. However, when used correctly, they can relieve the suffering of sick people. Some can even live with them for 20 years or longer. The story began when my uncle died. A year earlier, I had already had a strange gut feeling that urged me to visit him, even though I couldn't explain why. His apartment wasn't far away, so I went there the same day. But I found a locked door. The next few days were also unsuccessful. Then I received a letter from a lawyer and notary informing me that my uncle had died over a year ago and that it had taken them that long to find the heirs. Back then, my uncle suffered from alcoholism and engaged in strange behavior that was not well regarded in the family. As a result, my family distanced themselves from him, and he lived alone after his parents passed away. About myself, I never understood the purpose of alcohol, smoking, or any kind of drugs. I never tried them, nor did I understand why someone would become addicted to them. Since alcohol had no effect on me anyway, as I found out on a school trip in my 20s, the whole topic was uninteresting to me. Back to our story. I was shocked to read in the letter that my uncle had died under very strange circumstances. Apparently, he had drunk so much alcohol during the winter that he thought it was a good idea to sleep naked in a neighbor's garden. He froze to death. You can probably guess what I think about alcohol, drugs, or any other substances. There's no need to elaborate. The internet is full of people on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, or Threads who proudly claim that certain substances are legal. I don't even need to write down my opinion about that. But this incident is one of the reasons why I'm writing this story at all. So a special thanks to the unnecessary and bizarre comments. You're one of the reasons this story exists. Back to the story again. So there I was. My father had just died. A rented apartment. My own vacation apartment over in Aalbeck, less than 50 meters from the beach. An apartment I inherited from my uncle. The only question left was, where would I go? Stay in Bremen, where an elephant watches over whether a person has good friendships or not. Or move to Euston. But that's another story for another time. Either way, I had to decide. But first, I had to get rid of all my stuff, either sell it or give it away. Back then, platforms like eBay or today's internet didn't exist, so I gave away most of it. A friend of mine had an idea. He suggested putting everything I wanted to get rid of in a garage and leaving it open overnight. If I was lucky, someone would take my junk. After all, as the saying goes, opportunity makes thieves. And the plan worked. For the next few weeks, I kept filling the garage with things I didn't need, stuff I already had twice or 3 times. This way, I saved money on container and disposal fees. Until, well, what can I say? The last day came when I put in the final batch. What I hadn't counted on was my observant neighbor, who lived alone. He had just returned from vacation and lived below me. He had been watching everything and called the police, thinking I was being robbed. The police caught a couple, and I was informed. Through tears, they confessed that they had taken everything from my garage, which honestly was fine with me. I wanted to get rid of that stuff anyway. I had never seen them at my street sales. They always acted like they were better than others. Even when I walked my pet, they would pass by with their noses high, snorting as if they belonged to a higher class. And now they sat in the police station, crying because they had been caught. Life works in strange ways. They tried to bribe me with dinner and offers of friendship so that I would drop the charges. especially because they were in training and didn't want it on their records. To be honest, they didn't need to bribe me. I'm not the type to look down on others. If they had just asked, I would have forgiven them and withdrawn the complaint. But the complaint didn't come from me. It came from my neighbor. So it was difficult to withdraw it even though no damage had been done. In the end, the case was dropped since there was no harm and no plaintiff. And now to the main story. Since I had been invited to dinner several times, I eventually went out to eat with the woman, her boyfriend, and her weed-addicted brother. Apparently, he had invited himself because he was constantly broke. Not that I knew this at the time. I thought, the more people, the better the conversation. During the first 3 dinners, everything seemed fine. They behaved normally. But appearances can be deceiving. At the 4th dinner, the truth finally came out. She suffered from depression and other issues. But that's another story for another time. Her boyfriend was the responsible, hard-working one. Her brother, however, was the black sheep, constantly in need of money for cigarettes, weed, or whatever else. After we finished eating, we left the restaurant and walked to my car. And now comes the reason why you should stay away from weed, legal drugs, or other substances. As we walked to the car, laughing and chatting, her brother suddenly asked, "This is really difficult now, isn't it?" Mind you, none of us had drunk alcohol that evening. We had just gone out for a nice meal. I looked at him, confused, and pressed the button on my remote key to unlock my car. The central locking clicked loudly, and all 4 doors opened. She and her boyfriend exchanged nervous glances, already suspecting that something embarrassing was about to happen. I could see the fear in their eyes. I stopped and asked her brother what the problem was. He, becoming increasingly nervous and confused, said he had forgotten which bus we needed to take, or which train, to get back to my car. Let me repeat. We were standing right in front of my car. I had just unlocked it. It should have been obvious that we could now drive home. The 2 remained silent, clearly ashamed. To lighten the mood, I jokingly said, "Yeah, sure, let's take bus number 123, ride through the city twice, come back here to the restaurant, and then drive my car home." Any normal person would have laughed at the absurdity, but her brother, completely dazed from his drug use, said, "Okay, let's take the bus." I opened the car and told everyone to get in, and believe it or not, he still wanted to take the bus to get to the car, the one right in front of him, before driving home. That, folks, is what drugs do to you. If you don't understand why I don't do drugs or why I'm against them, well then you didn't understand this story. The end.